Hey everybody, it's Stephen Brooke and welcome to my YouTube channel on architectural photography and composition. In an earlier video, I discussed how to make a conversion from color images to black and white images. So what I would like to do today is to suggest 6 artists whom I think will be of value to you to study in your black and white photography. Some of them you know, some of them you might not have heard of before, but each of them has something really specific that I would like to call your attention to. So let's start. Black and white photography, you get to study composition without the seductive effects of color. And color really can bring you in, it can hide compositional weaknesses because it is so strong. Composing with a reduced palette, like in black and white, in a way is similar to the difference between modal music and really highly chromatic music. For example, the difference between Miles Davis's Kind of Blue or church modal music versus music like Mahler or Wagner. And because you are dealing with a relatively more limited palette, you're dealing with black and white tones rather than the entire gamut of the whole color spectrum. To be successful, to do it really well, to create images that have impact and power and lasting value and that hold your viewer's interest, you need to be lyrical. You need to have greater attention even to space and texture and areas without detail. So let's look at 6 engravers, view painters, whose work I think is really important in this area. Now, we have looked at these artists before in some previous videos. Piranesi, whose views of Rome are really well known, and we've discussed him before. Giuseppe Vassi, who came before Piranesi. William Bartlett, whose work in black and white in the Holy Land. Etienne Boulez, someone you need to check out. Luigi Rossini, one of the last really complete views of Rome done in the late 19th century. And Vicentini, who took Canaletto's paintings and did engravings of them. So you could use, if you sold one painting, that would be it. But if you made engravings, you could run them off like we run off prints. So the first artist I would like you to study is Hans Vredeman de Vries, 1527 to 1607. He was a Dutch Renaissance architect, painter, and engineer, and an engraver. And there's a book that you can get from Dover. It costs $5 or $6 now. And this was a textbook on perspective drawing and the use of rectangular armatures to organize the picture plane. And this was like composition in its purest form. And in a way, it's very much like etudes are for someone studying piano. There's Nicholas Slomninsky's Thesaurus of Scales and Melodic Patterns. This was independent of any songs. They were just a collection of modes and scales to practice. Even John Coltrane studied from that book. And Oliver Nelson's Patterns for Improvisation for Jazz, taking patterns and practicing them, even though this was not the ultimate art form, but they were exercises that you could use to develop your skills. And the same thing is true with these engravings by Vredeman de Vries. Axial compositions, one-point perspective, but off-center vanishing points. And he draws out all of his armatures, every line, to indicate how his perspective is being formed. He uses armatures to show you how he establishes his verticals and his horizontals, things we've talked about in previous videos. And this is a wonderful book just looking at rendering architecture in perspective. I used it, I mean, these were very much in my mind when I created these images in Rome and Santa Maria Maggiore, San Paolo Fuori le Mura. These are axial compositions, one-point perspective, vanishing point off-center. One-point perspective, central vanishing point, axial composition, and like we saw in Vredeman, in Sanradam, a very low eye height to reduce distortion in the foreground and have these ceilings overhead. Here's my view of the Cappella Paolina, the Vatican, St. Peter's in Rome, using this same idea. Giovanni Bautista Falda was an architect and an engraver who also did work in Rome, but came before Vassi and came before Piranesi. And there's something interesting about his work I'd like you to consider. Here's one of Piranesi's engravings, and you can see that Falda has a really reduced tonal palette than that of Piranesi. He's decidedly axial, but he's dealing whites, blacks, maybe one or two grays. What I like about looking at Falda's work was how simple and pure it is, because one of the things that's important in photographing architecture and then rendering it in black and white is to simplify the elements so that the architecture really comes out clearly to the viewer. Here are some of his other engravings. They're clear, they're simple, reduced tonality. Almost all of them are axial views. And so they're a real simple approach to rendering, but they're very effective because you absolutely can see the architecture. And this is, again, this is Palazzo dei Congressi, EUR in Rome. I have a pretty limited palette here to begin with. Axial composition, 1-point perspective. Notice again how low my eye height is. If I'm up higher, then the patterns the pattern in the ground here, it starts to get distorted and starts to overpower it. Here actually I'm about a foot off the ground, maybe a foot and a half off the ground, no higher than that, so that my building has a monumentality, my shadows are really precisely controlled, and again, I don't have distortion down here in the foreground. Now, let's get all the way to an orthochromatic, that is black and white. And this is Franz Masereel, who was called by some the godfather of the graphic novel. And he has a book of woodcuts called The City. He uses all of the rigorous compositional conventions that we've talked about that the view painters use. And his use of black and white is so masterful, you almost get a feeling of grays in here. But what I want to call your attention to is that these are off-axis views, but they are so directional. There is no question about where you enter this image and where your eye travels. He has you really tightly controlled. We talked about this with Cézanne and landscape, how in Cézanne's landscape paintings, he almost always gives you a way in. Well here, Franz Masereel, you know where to come in, and his use of verticals like we've talked about, he controls your eye really carefully. And he does all of this with just black and white, no grays whatsoever. Now, where is this of value? It's a value if you're doing something that inherently has a minimal tonal palette. Going back and looking at Masereel, you can see how precisely he arranges the blacks and the whites to create volume. And I've really done the same thing here with my view near the Stazione Termini, particularly with the LA fire station. And when you look at images like Masereel's, you can see that you can execute images in black and white that have very few tones to them. Maybe a black and a white and maybe one or two grays, and you can do that successfully. Now, a master illustrator, architect, Hugh Ferris, and we have talked about him before. Hugh Ferris, one of his books, The Metropolis of Tomorrow, I highly recommend that you find a copy. Again, Dover Publications has a copy of this book for really not a lot of money. Here's what I love about Hugh Ferris. First of all, these renderings are really dramatic. He just ennobles the architecture. He is so taken with what he is showing you. He uses atmospheric perspective, and remember, in color, you get color perspective. The reds and the yellows come to your eye, the blues and the greens recede. No color. You need to be able to create you create depth with atmospheric perspective, which he does beautifully. This is a very optimistic kind of rendering, embracing technology, embracing the future. This, even though it is black and white, it's hardly dystopian. I mean, you can tell he really has faith in what's about to come. And also, He uses very rigorous compositional schemes. I've parsed one of these out before. He has, here, let's back up. He has all these verticals in here. What determines where they all occur? What determines this angle for this vanishing point? Here's how he does it. This is basically a 2x3 composition, and 1/5 of the way in is right where he places his dark vertical to balance this sharp perspective. So he has his subdivisions. It determines almost every position of the verticals, and then when he ties together these points with these rectangular armatures, that's how he's establishing his vanishing points. Elevated view, but with rectified verticals. Something to keep in mind if you're doing drone photography. Just because you're getting up high and you're kind of sometimes looking down on your subject matter, when you bring those in to work on them, remember, there has to be a really good reason for you not to have your verticals rectified. So even in your drone photography, remember, go back, make sure the verticals are straight, just like he did here. If you look at this image on the right, there is a very precise rhythm and alternation of darks to light. Here's light gray, dark, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark, going all the way, giving this wonderful rhythm to the tones. No color. I take cues from Hugh Ferris all the time, and these are some of my views in New York City, and I'm thinking about Hugh Ferris. Believe me, he's not somebody you unsee. Once you've seen how noble his work is, this informs you when you're doing work like this, and this is on Miami Beach. Martin Lewis is an etcher and an illustrator, 1881 to 1962, and surprisingly, he is not very well known. And it's amazing because his work is so brilliant, is so masterful. So books on him are also really hard to find. For any of these artists, go to Google, put their name in, and then have a look at the stills that are available. What I love about Martin Lewis's work is how he deals with nighttime black and white imagery. These deep shadows with compositional weight frame his views. And again, there are areas on these deep shadows that have no detail, like De Chirico. And you can see what's very important about how he deals with light and dark is that these light areas are what lead your eye through the composition. So when you are working at night in black and white, keep in mind that you want to still give the viewer direction. Where do you start your viewer? How do you take them through the image? Because if it's going to be really dark, you're a human being, your eye goes to the light images. Your eye is going to follow the light, and he has these big verticals here. He has this overhang that takes you back in. These are so wonderful. Go back and check out Martin Lewis. One of the things, he taught Edward Hopper, somebody who we really love and we venerate. He taught him the basis of etchings, and these are some of Edward Hopper's etchings, and you can see how much he's influenced, in fact, by Martin. I did a whole series of nighttime views of Rome, and that was what was in my mind. That's what I remember when I was out there. And again, I'm trying to lead you in. I'm trying to use the lights to guide you through here. Here's the light coming in, carrying you around. It's pretty dark in here, and carrying you all the way back. And my last little bit back here by St. Peter's is lit up. But again, it comes from this studying these engravers. Black and white cinematography is really important for us as photographers, particularly in black and white. Now, in my book, I have a list of films and some TV that I think is really important. And again, you can go online, Fritz Lang, Metropolis, and see some of these stills. And you'll see that the cinematography uses all the conventions that we have been talking about. Here, this is really like a streetscape. On axis, here are the receding lines, here's the vertical holding you in. Orson Welles, on almost everybody's list of the greatest films ever produced, Citizen Kane is usually number one, but it's almost always in the top 5 or 10. You can freeze frame any image in Citizen Kane, and it's a textbook on lighting. Remember too that the stage set, the stage directors and the lighting people had their training in theater, so they knew how to deal with dramatic lighting. Carol Reed's The Third Man. Again, all the things that we've discussed, you see that these cinematographers knew all that work. So again, you can freeze frame any of these and study how they put together their black and white images. Again, no color, but look how powerful these images are. Kurosawa's Rashomon. Vittorio De Sica's The Bicycle Thief. Roland Lee and Jack Otterson, Son of Frankenstein. Yes, Son of Frankenstein. This is a beautiful movie, and the set design and the lighting is just spectacular. Again, their control of shadow and light is masterful, and they have so much to teach us. But here's the movie I want you to spend some time with and to learn about. And it's a movie by Fred Zinnemann, he is the director, and Floyd Crosby, who's the cinematographer. And the movie is High Noon. And without the use of color and without the kind of visceral, emotional impact, Zinnemann and Crosby use surgically precise compositional techniques to create tension and drama and direction and narrative. Every single frame in this movie is a textbook, but I have two in particular that I think show the precision with which they created their imagery. First of all, quickly, the movie is about the sheriff, Will Kane, who puts a killer in jail. The killer gets out. He's coming back to the town at high noon, basically to kill the sheriff. The sheriff has just gotten married, and his wife is a Quaker, against violence, wants him to leave town, give it all up, get out of town while he can. He has an obligation to himself and to the town to not let these people come back in and take over the town. That's the essence of the story. Here's one of the stills that I want you to check out. And I want to show you all of the aspects that Zinnemann and Crosby put into this one frame. Again, this is one frame in the entire movie, but it is so powerful. Here are the wonderful elements in this movie. Number one, and again, even though all the diagonals push your eye back here, you're given elements throughout this frame that stop you and take you through exactly the way they want to. First of all, have a look down here at this tiny shadow. What this shadow does is just like Cézanne's pathways in his landscape. This little shadow moves you to the right to this wooden walkway. Otherwise, your eye goes all the way down there. Moves you here. Here's a full height vertical, almost full height, balancing all of this. The here, there's a little hand cart in there that sits in front of this next part of the building, again, to give you a sense of space. There's a shadow line, precise shadow line, that leads you to his three gang members to create a sense of depth and to create a sense of texture. This is all in shadow, but he's got it at just the right time of day where each end of the joist is illuminated to give you this extra layer. Now here are these three idle cowboys. They're just sitting there, and they're kind of, this guy's drinking, this guy's playing a harmonica, this guy just sitting looking off, which is interesting when you know that there is this impending battle coming, that all hell is about to break loose. Yet here, these guys are just sitting here calmly. What's interesting here, the bottle is here, his arm is here, they go up, and then this leg comes down to stop your eye again, point to the end of the walkway, and now you get past that, and here the spout from the water tower turns you back in. And again, atmospheric perspective to give you this tremendous sense of distance. And here the soft atmospheric perspective is in balance to this high contrast area over here. So all of these things are going on in this one frame. So when you look at it, you may not be aware of each little element, but he takes you through here. And again, this is going by, you're not sitting in an art museum looking at a still image on a wall. You are looking at this within the context of the entire movie. So he has got to use all of these surgically precise compositional elements to really focus your eye on what's going on. You don't want it, he doesn't want you drifting. So here you're moving in, coming this way, seeing these guys, moving off, turning this way, seeing off in the distance. Off in the distance is where this train is coming, and again where the head of this gang is coming to kill the sheriff. That's just one frame. Here's another. Here's a little Dutch painting. I've actually flipped this to show you how precisely the skeleton of this image is set up. But there are a number of things going on. All Dutch paintings have some kind of narrative. Even though the people aren't that important, how they look at one another is a way to help direct your eye through the painting. So let me show you what he has happening in here that's just so remarkably masterful. First of all, the brightest object in this frame is the clock. High noon, that's the name of the movie. That's when Will Kane's life is going to be on the line. And here's this guy back here. He's holding his watch and he's looking towards Will Kane. Now the sheriff, he is dead center in this composition. Why? Because the decision to fight or leave, that's his entirely. And so he is center on the composition. The stairs point to him, the banister points to him. There's no question about where the primary decision has to be made. Now, he is looking towards his wife. She is sitting behind this wall. She's not over here with him. She's on this side of the wall. That's one way in which she is separated from him. This is their wedding day. Her white dress also separates her. It's her wedding dress, but it's also a symbol of her Quaker belief in nonviolence. He's mostly in black. She's mostly in white. Here's the key to this image. He's looking at her. Look where her gaze is. Her gaze is off frame into this unknown area. And look, there's no vertical here to hold your eye. You as a viewer are meant to see this and follow her eye off to whatever is going to happen next. He doesn't hold you in this frame. So all of these elements work like a little Dutch painting, but they are so important. Each little element adds to the narrative of the movie. So here are the 6 people I would like you to think about. Vredeman de Vries, his perspective drawings and compositional structure. Giovanni Bautista Falda, direct, axial, simplified compositions. Frans Mazaril, maximum effect with minimum tonalities. Hugh Ferris, an optimistic point of view, ennobling approach to architecture and the future. Martin Lewis, precise shadow control and balance for evocative evening imagery. And finally, Fred Zinnemann and Floyd Crosby, ultimate compositional precision in black and white cinematography for maximum narrative effect. So thumbs up on the video if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. And if you have a chance, check out StephenBrookePhotography.com. You can take a look inside of the book and see what's there. I think you'll really enjoy it. Thanks for visiting, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.